Do you think life is simpler as time evolves? For some, it can be more complicated when facing issues about health, estate plans, probate, long-term care, and more. That's why Attorney-CPA Joe Cordell hosts ElderTalk with TuckerAllen, providing intelligent answers for those thinking about their future. Here's Attorney-CPA Joe Cordell.
Welcome to another episode of ElderTalk. This week we have a special guest. I think those of you who are in the St. Louis area at least will be especially interested in this guest, but I would argue those of you nationally will find this very informative. We have an expert on retirement living, especially as it pertains to retirement communities, and I suspect will turn out to be quite an advocate of that, not as a place where you end up having to schlep to at some point, but rather as a place that you happily run to as soon as you have the opportunity. So a different perspective on retirement from somebody who has been there, knows the industry personally, as well as has written a very successful book that some of you might have read. Now that I have this teaser, I'll let you do the proper introduction, Jim.
It would be my pleasure. We have David Smith. His book it's about time, and you started back when you were 35, and you co-founded and you continue to manage the Gatesworth Communities in St. Louis. Welcome, David.
Thank you. It's great to be here and have a chance to speak directly to some of your audience.
Well, there aren't a lot of people who can be an expert or a consultant on an entire industry who has also been very much an insider and who has seen it from its fundamentals on up. And I think you are positioned in a way to talk about this subject that few people are. So I don't know where we should start. Let's start with getting your story. I mean, the background of how you ended up in this industry. You didn't start out with that determination to be involved in retirement living, did you?
You were an attorney, correct? Started out as an attorney?
I started off, I always had this quest to be heroic in terms of serving other people in some fashion or another. And I started off, Joe, like you, practicing law. I was a partner in a law firm. I practiced 10 years. I had a great practice. And I was motivated to consider moving to another industry and taking on a different career path, both by my in-laws who were involved in Cincinnati in skilled nursing and who were willing and encouraging me. They wanted to invest in some crazy idea that I had. And my father, who helped construct and design the programs and amenities for the Covenant House out on the grounds of the JCCA when it was first being built.
Right.
And so in the late 1980s, I had no prior experience at development, and there were actually no models available nationally. But we had an idea we were going to build the best retirement community in America, and we were going to figure out how to do it. And the best thing we had going for us is we had no idea what that would entail. I had two partners, my partner, Ilana Spitzberg, who knew a lot about gerontology and how the programs and services should work, and a partner, Charlie Deutsch, who was a residential builder and developer. And he and Bob Leonard, I had them commit and agree that they were going to build it, and I was going to fill it because in addition to my background in law, I was a real estate broker, and that's how I paid my way through college and law school. And I had a lot of experience in selling individual family homes. And I thought, wow, this community offers so many more benefits and so much more value. It'll be a cakewalk. And so I committed to fill it up. And it turned out I had a really hard job because all of the techniques that a transactional seller, like someone selling real estate, are pretty ineffective when it comes to people moving into senior housing. And so it was a completely different kind of challenge. And in order to build the model, we looked at what would we like to live in? What would be the programs and services that we would enjoy when we reached this stage of life? We were only all in our 30s at the time. We guessed pretty well. The community has done very well, but it continues to be a struggle in terms of figuring out how to lease it up. And that's where I've spent the last 35 years studying, practicing, training, and teaching others.
So your major in college, undergrad, I want to go back just a little bit. What did you major in? I'm just curious.
Poli-sci and philosophy.
Of course.
Well, okay. I was wondering if it's going to be business or healthcare or something. And then you went to law school where?
WashU.
Okay, WashU, marvelous law school. Yeah,
Class of 76.
Okay, I'm very active with WashU. I'm on the board of advisors there of the law school. So you chose to practice in what area of practice before you entered this field?
Joe, I started off in pretty much real estate and real estate development orientation, and I morphed eventually into being in those days, you could be a general practitioner, like an internist.
Mm-hmm.
And so I would take on small businesses and represent them in personal matters when they got into conflict, when they were growing, whatever problems and difficulties they had, I would take on for them.
Huh.
And it sounds like in terms of retirement communities, you got in on the ground floor where it wasn't, popular like it is now.
Yeah, so Jill, when I got involved, we opened the Gatesworth in 1988. It's at Del Mar and 170. Sure. And at the time, it was a $30 million project. It was purpose-built as a retirement community. And there were only 2 or 3 places that were anything close to what we envisioned, which was residential, person-centered, high quality of services and amenities. And so we went to visit those, but again, there were only a few. And so we really had to create the model, the service model and the residential model from scratch.
And that's what you mean when you say that it was beneficial that you hadn't been steeped in the standard practices of the day.
That's true, because the standards of the day at that time were very institutional, usually run by the church or by the state. They were long-term care facilities, only became licensed with the advent of Medicare and Medicaid in the late 60s, but prior to that were unregulated. Then they became very institutionalized, sort of one size fits one.
Right.
And we wanted something very different, something residential, something where people could have choices, and that really fostered independence and continued use of strengths and abilities.
So you had the challenge of convincing seniors to make this transition, because I'm sure a lot of them were thinking, no, I don't want to go into a nursing home, which of course this isn't a nursing home.
Yeah, you're exactly right. And I thought of my challenge from the beginning, just as you suggested, convincing and persuading, using everything I learned in selling residential homes, and I was really good at that, and skills that I fine-tuned in terms of reason, logic, persuasion by practicing law for 10 years. It turned out that those are all based on reason and logic, whereas the decision to move into senior housing is nearly all emotional, and it's very fear-based. It's the fear of losing one's identity,
Sure.
one's role, diminished capacity, all the things that come in society in terms of ageism, as well as negative preconceived notions, as you suggested, that it really is just a nursing home in disguise.
And persuading people that rather than a place of last resort, it's a place of first resort. And that, I guess, was necessary for you to be able to sell this, I'll call it a product, but this lifestyle in which you actually have, superior services, superior food, I suspect, and accommodations, because you were fighting, to swim upstream, because that was a pretty well settled reputation that you were butting up against in the late 80s, early 90s.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. The negative preconceived notions were very strong. And what we were really selling, as I came to learn over a number of years, is change, transformational change, acceptance of change. And that's difficult for any of us. It's not really selling. Selling isn't really effective. And so after reading and studying all the best people who were in our industry at the time, and then people like Zig Ziglar and Tom Hopkins and Brian Tracy,
guys.
Neil Rackham, I concluded that you can only close people in a traditional sales setting when they're predisposed to buy, when there's some desire or some demand for the product or service. But because of the history of senior housing and because it was such a new concept at the time, nobody wanted to buy what we were trying to sell. And so even today, 90% of qualified seniors, people who could benefit logically from all the benefits that you elicited, plus many more, self-respect, convenience of transportation,
the social dimension.
Yeah, the social dimension and interaction. Only about 10% ever say yes. 90% stay home.
Give us an idea, play-by-play, of what strategies you use to try to convince someone.
Yeah, so what's really interesting, and it took me a while to learn this, and then have subsequently developed a theoretical model and a CRM, a software system to execute, is that there really is no convincing or persuading. It's almost like dealing with a teenager, if you've ever had teenage kids, as I have.
I do right now, so I understand.
You do. So the best we can hope for is maintain communication through a trusting relationship, and be able to, through the use of questioning, help people clarify their own motivations and their own desires and their own fears, so that hopefully they can self-persuade to what's in their best interest.
Yeah.
So it's really much more about active listening, reflecting, using some skills from the psychology of change, often called motivational interviewing, to get people ready to buy before you try to sell or offer solutions.
And these retirement communities are like a resort.
Supposed to be like a resort.
They are like, that's what I meant to say. They're like a resort. So I would think it would be appealing, to make that transition. But is it just people are afraid of change, the unknown?
We're all afraid of change and the unknown, especially when it impacts every aspect of our lives. My friend Bernie, at his granddaughter's wedding a couple of weeks ago, I said, 92 years old, I said, "Bernie, how are you doing?" He said, "Oh my God, you have no idea. Old age is such a ferocious adversary. Mm-hmm. It's ubiquitous, it's continuous, and inevitably it leads to a bad conclusion." And I was thinking about what he was saying, and the choice that a retirement community is an alternative to staying at home, usually in a situation that no longer fits their needs. So that's on the one hand. On the other hand is the fear, the emotional fear of losing your role, your sense of authority within the family and decision-making. And that fear, it can be overwhelming, especially the concept of losing one's identity. I know who I've been. I'm familiar with my home. I'm comfortable here. I have a nostalgic sense that it used to be terrific. It's not really working right now, but I'm scared to death to change.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I wonder if the whole idea of trying to convince people to consider something like this is a little more like Steve Jobs, I think, often argued that the point is not to figure out what people want and provide it to them, but he said is to figure out what people can't really imagine themselves, but when they see it, they think it's wonderful and they want it. And I see where there's an analogy here with what you're describing, because people don't, I think, realize what it could be living in a community with others who are very active and lots of options socially and in terms of entertainment and recreation. So I think that you are kind of bringing something that people didn't know to expect. Do you think there was some of that?
Yeah, that's for sure, especially in the beginning. And having started my own .com company called Sherpa in about five or 6 years ago, I learned what Steve Jobs meant. And selling Sherpa or subscriptions to Sherpa is relatively easy compared to senior housing, even though it is innovative and completely new and different within the industry, just like the Gatesworth was when we got started. The difference is there's no inherent emotional resistance to buying a computer software application. Either it benefits you and you can describe and explain that or not. The problem with moving to senior housing is that it challenges one's sense of identity, one's sense of personal dignity, one's pride of ownership in a home, which we're all taught from the beginning is sacred. Yeah, until you help somebody confront those challenges and address those emotional issues, the product doesn't matter. It's almost like when you first notice, if you've ever been in a relationship that didn't work out like you expected, and you're aware that it's not working out, but you don't necessarily want to admit it right away or try looking for other partners. And if somebody comes in and says, "Oh my gosh, Jill, I've got just the guy for you," and you're not even thinking about leaving in the relationship that you're in, it's just too soon. You've got to talk through.
And because it's comfortable.
Yes.
Yes.
What problems, difficulties, and dissatisfactions are you having? Are you sure you can't stay at home? I've thought about this a lot. Let me see if some of the solutions that have worked for other people might work for you. So you try to help people become aware of and articulate their own reasons. If they can stay in their own home and that's what they want to do, then by all means, we would encourage and support them. But the reality is people don't call us or inquire about what we have to offer unless the place is already on fire, unless things already aren't working.
Right. Unless there's a serious problem.
Right.
Yes.
Yeah. And that fascinates me is the tenacity with which people hang on to their homes. And I've seen it in my family. I've seen it, of course, with clients. This idea that they really want to stay at home. And it's almost a cliche.
It's so sentimental.
I don't know what it is, but people have this fixation or this really, strong drive to be at home. And I think it's some of all of what you've said. I mean, I'm sure that hits on the bulk of the reasons, familiarity and other things. But it's just really fascinating to me. I would not have thought that people would cling to what has been their current home that way. And because it's a little foreign to me. I don't feel that way. And I know enough about the opportunities in community living for people who are retired. I've traveled to Florida and other places, and I haven't been in your facilities, but I've been past it, and I can imagine the quality, the amenities. So I know that there are wonderful things out there, and I just don't see myself as being one of those. Apparently, I'm in a minority who wants to stay at home when I can go live in this great place that's like a resort and have wonderful food prepared for me, get to know friends and have neighbors who I have a closer, more interaction with than I do in my home. I just see it as a lot of pluses. So, but you've been battling that for decades now.
Yeah, still to this day, still trying to figure out. So I told you where the industry is. The average sales professional in our industry is able to convert only about 25% of the people that they get face-to-face with. In other words, if they've had a tour or a home visit or had a chance to meet with, they're only closing about half of those. I mean, about 25% of those. I'm able, and the people who have worked with our methodology have been able to convert nearly twice that many just by helping people get ready before we start offering solutions. And my conundrum, what I still can't figure out, is why I can't get the other half. Because, like you say, it's so, the argument in favor is so overwhelming. And it's truly just about emotions.
Do you think it's more difficult to convince people who say are widowed because they don't want to let go of their home because it reminds them of their spouse, and getting rid of their home would be in some way taking away that memory? Do you find that to be true?
Sure. Well, the memory is something that we take with us one way or another, and we can help preserve that memory in terms of stories and scrapbooks and paying attention to what the stories are. And the reality is that the holding on to the past and identity is an extremely strong force. That's what psychologists tell us, keep us from making transformational change, whether it's drug and alcohol abuse, whether it's losing weight, quitting smoking, anything that requires us to change our behavior.
Yeah, I can see that. What then do you find as you offer opportunities? What do you find people are primarily looking for? And can you give people who are watching this a sort of an insider's view on how much does it cost in this industry? Not just not your particular facilities per se, but to give them a sense of what kind of costs do they look at? Can they expect to normally pay something on the front end only, or should they expect to pay something on the front end and over time? Can you talk a little bit about the way the financial end works in the industry?
Sure. There's a couple of things to unpack. The first part of what you were asking was in terms of how people think about it. And remember, this is a Depression era generation. And their question is, do I deserve it? Is it worth it? Can I get by without it? So cost does become very important.
Mm-hmm.
Cost has been worked out by the provider side in several different categories. One is what's called a buy-in or refundable entry fee model, where you pay a certain amount up front. You usually get a reduction in the monthly payment and then some long-term benefit over time if you need higher levels of healthcare. The other model is more a pay-as-you-go, a rental community. And both models have had success in different parts of the country. How much depends a lot on the level of service and the amount of staffing and amenities that you're getting. But you can get into, let's say, a one-bedroom apartment in independent living for, say, in the neighborhood of $3,000 a month or about $100 a day. When you think about that, that's less than a Marriott Courtyard or a Hampton Inn.
And that includes food and as well as housing and utilities?
It may, Joe. It depends on how the services and the amenities are parsed out and charged. But for $3,000 to $4,000 a month, you could get all of those things in a very nice place. And then it goes up from there, depending on the size of the unit. We have units at the Gatesworth that are close to 3,000 square feet. And
wow.
Those are obviously a little more expensive.
So now, which model, though, the Gatesworth, is that more where you pay something on the front end and then you pay monthly?
We chose to invest our own equity instead of that of our residents and to have just a monthly service fee.
Oh, okay.
It's worked well for us.
Yeah, and when people are looking to move into long-term care, are they, and I say long-term care, that includes assisted living as well as independent living for this conversation, right?
Yes, and some forms of memory care.
Oh, so you all have facilities for that as well?
Yes.
Okay.
And we have skilled nursing on our campus so that we have a full continuum of care.
All right. Yeah. And we've talked before about the continuum of care where you go into a place and you never have to leave because you can, if you have additional problems, you just move or transition to another level of care.
That's right on the campus.
Yeah, that's right there.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
So when people are planning to make this transition, do they often sell a home in conjunction with the move, or is the home something they try to hang on to and still move into, for example, your independent living?
So where I've worked across the country in the U.S. and Canada in more moderate price communities, people are forced to sell their home and have use of the home equity. And there are some now interesting programs within the senior living market to help you free up that equity while you're waiting to sell your home. And those are very exciting. In the higher income brackets, like we have at the Gatesworth, people often choose not to sell their home for a while and they come try it and see if they enjoy the lifestyle before selling the home. Emotionally, that two-step process is sometimes easier.
And they're not required to make a long-term commitment with the model that you're describing. Is that right?
So in a buy-in model, there is a certain sense of commitment. Until your unit is resold, you typically don't get the front-end payment back. In our community, you can give us 60 days notice.
Wow.
The burden's on us to make you happy.
That seems like a better model. I'm not saying that because I'm talking to you, but I know people who are in facilities with the other model, and I'm sure it has some advantages. But it seems that, as you just said, there's such an incentive to keep people happy when you know they can give 60 days notice and move.
Sure.
And but now I guess their prices are not guaranteed, though, are they? I mean, in other words, you would have to have the flexibility.
Yeah, over the course of over 30 years, we've never increased prices more than 3% year to year.
Wow.
Wow.
Now that may be challenged in this crazy environment we're in right now. But
it may be because COVID has really, been difficult for all of us. Interestingly, in that balance between should I stay and hold on to my home versus should I try an adventure and become vulnerable and go out there and become my own new self and write my next chapter, in that balance, COVID has weighed both ways. On the one hand, staying at home, some people equate retirement communities and independent living and assisted living with some of the tragedies that happened in skilled nursing. But the situations and the environments are completely different.
Yeah.
Many other people have found that the staying at home during the period of COVID was so isolating and so challenging on many levels that we're finding for the first time many more people who are actually trying to, the demand for senior housing is actually up as high as I've ever seen it during my time in the career.
You know, I was going to ask you that if COVID maybe perhaps helped seniors become more interested in making the transition, because I would think the isolation had to be really, really challenging.
It has, and isolation was difficult for any of us and for all of us, and we've all suffered in various ways because of COVID. But seniors, were particularly vulnerable.
Right.
Yeah, yeah. And you have a great location for that first facility that you opened. People who don't know St. Louis, that's that perfect balance between being too far in and too far out. And you were close to everything in that location. Was that just good fortune, or was that just that you were just exceptionally prescient?
It was purposeful on our part. Both my partner and myself. I grew up in University City. He grew up in Ladue, and so it was very central to our world at the time, and was also the center at the time of 35 years ago of the demographic trends within St. Louis.
Sure.
And has a high concentration of wealth.
Mm-hmm. Well, so do you see then for people who are watching this show and may be in the market to make this transition sometime over the next several years, do you see that the trend is that there's going to be an oversupply, and as a result, costs will continue to be maybe a little more affordable? Or do you see that there will be supply challenges?
Yeah, I think the industry currently, many people within the industry currently, because of what's happened during COVID to their occupancies, feel that maybe there's too much supply for the demand. I have argued for 35 years, if you only have a 10% capture rate among the people that you're trying to serve, you can't be oversupplied. The problem is in creating demand one prospect at a time. And in terms of what is going to happen, the demand curve is so skewed. We're in a rise, but then it evened out and it jumps up again with the baby boomers over the next probably 10 years. The supply is going to be, the number of people in need of retirement housing is going to more than double over the course of the next 10 years, which is just incredible from that perspective.
David, I was wondering, how often do you find that a senior's children are involved in helping them make this process?
Oh, that's a good question.
That's a great question. It depends a lot on the level of care and the level of independence and autonomy that the individual senior has. It depends upon their internal relationship and family dynamics. But it's quite often at one stage or another, even in independent living, to have adult children who are involved in one way or another. And they can be a significant influence in general for the positive.
Are they ever a hindrance where you might have a child that doesn't want mom or dad to go in, maybe has some ulterior motives, doesn't want the house being sold because that may be their inheritance?
Yeah, but not very often.
You're cynical, Jill.
I know I am.
What happens that does happen, Jill, from time to time, and I've seen it.
I bet it does.
It your stomach. But more often what we find, and this is trying to respond to a question, Joe, you asked earlier, about what ultimately convinces people, or how do we convince? We really don't convince them, but we empower them, and we give them the confidence that they can make a valid decision by drawing on their own decision-making from their career, from their family, from their life. Because as we get older, we make many decisions. and they come out in various degrees of success. But what we lose as older adults many times is our confidence in our ability to, on our own, make our own decision. So the adult children who are the most helpful are ones that help promote a sense of independence, control, autonomy, sort of the opposite of what you think about when you think about selling, and go with the skid, follow the direction of the resistance to help the senior adult themselves find their own answer. That's the most powerful persuasion, self-persuasion.
But don't you think, though, that that there's a good chance that the later half of the baby boomers, for example, those born for 55 and beyond. So let's say baby boomers start with those born in 45. I think clearly we know, and you just described with statistical precision, the number of people or the portion that will be inclined to stay at home. And we know that that's common in that group. But I'm wondering whether baby boomers are going to turn out to be different within baby boomers, so that those of us who are in the bottom half, the later half of the class, I'll say, and I'm in that. I was born in 58. My wife, I guess, slides in. She was born in 63, so I think that's still baby boomer. So anyway, so don't you think that those in that cohort are more likely to be willing to move and do the things you describe? Because I think you're right. I mean, 10% of the market is all you have, and I think that's shockingly low, given how. And we don't want to dwell on this too much. I think we made the point that there are a lot of very good reasons to move into a place where you have all these services and all these opportunity and social opportunities, and et cetera, et cetera. And 10% of the people are taking advantage of that?
Yeah.
It just seems like, as you said, there's such opportunity for growth. Do you think that might occur with the second half of the baby boomers?
I think it's more likely to. I'm in the first half, Joe. I was born in 1950.
But you don't think that way.
No, because I eventually think I will wind up in a community because of all the benefits that there are. And I hope that I'm smart enough to take my own teachings and coachings and learnings and my own experience in decision making and do that before I reach a crisis and somebody else has to make a decision about me moving. Will the baby boomers have a different decision making experience? I believe so, because we've watched a generation or two of senior housing evolve. We've watched parents and loved ones and parents of our friends move into places, and we've watched what the result is. It's no longer, this idea or, sort of dream abstraction. It's reality for many of us all across the country.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think word is starting to spread.
Yeah.
People are going to visit, relatives who live in these really cool places, and they're very impressed. Yeah, I think that's going on, because I myself, that's how I first became acquainted, was visiting people who had bought into some of these nice places. So I'm saying to my wife, look, getting old is not so bad. This is where I'd want to be. Yeah, absolutely. And David, do you ever find with the residents, especially the ones that were, say, the most resistant, that they're now saying, oh my goodness, I wish I would have done this 10 years ago? Almost after 30 to 60 days, regardless of where I am in the U.S. or Canada, almost every single time, unless there's an problem in the operational culture or, actually some lack of quality in services. But if you provide people with the level of services that they expect and they deserve, yes, almost every single time, people within 30 to 60 days say, I wish I had moved sooner. I wrote the book for sales professionals in the senior housing industry, and then I began giving copies of it to our residents and resident family members. And when they read the book, what they said was, oh my gosh, this totally validates my decision. I don't know why it was so hard. I wish I would have moved sooner. I see what I went through. I can actually identify having gone through those various stages of readiness for change. And I only wish I was able to see all the benefits logically and rationally, when I started my investigation. We should also mention this book, It's About Time. How do people get a copy of the book, It's About Time? So it's available now on Amazon and on Audible. Just use my name, David A. Smith, as the author, and It's About Time. Let's put a link on the website. We definitely will put that link up. A very interesting career you've had. And yeah, I mean, you've
Thank
been a
you.
pioneer in many ways.
I have, but I've also learned so much from the population that I've been dealing with and from their families and for how they make decisions. I'm actually thinking about making a documentary film to take
Really?
some specific sample kinds of stories of the decision making. And instead of talking to professionals, although I may talk to professionals, really base the whole thing on the very difficult situation that people are in making decisions about health, finances, and housing.
And this would be based on people in facilities like across the country. It wouldn't focus on just your facilities.
Correct, as well as the senior housing professionals that try to deal with them, the owner operators, and the people that work there from all different perspectives.
I think that would be great.
I think that would too. And we'd love to have you back on once the documentary is completed. David, I want to ask you too. I would think that the camaraderie is probably the biggest benefit, especially for those who say we're very lonely and isolated. And I'm not just talking about the pandemic, even pre-pandemic.
Yeah. So social interaction is critical. Everybody wants it and needs it and deserves it in some form or another. For some people, they like a lot of it. And so most communities now offer a wide range of services and programs and entertainment, both on the campus and outside the campus, both indoors and out. So there's a lot to choose from. The socialization can also take place with staff. At the Gatesworth, for example, in our independent living, we have about 300 units and about 275 people that work there.
Wow.
So there's a ton of service and amenity and programs that we can offer on a regular basis. And a lot of times the best social interaction takes place with Alex at the front desk or Kai in the dining room. It can be with any of our staff.
So how do you, though, and I'm going to resist going in, we could easily end up another 30 minutes if your time permitted, but I know that we're supposed to wrap up here. But I'm just curious, how do you, for example, with 300 people, in a way you're like a hotelier, sort of, and to maintain, for example, a cuisine, just on the food itself, how do you continue to make it interesting having to provide food and economical, providing food for that many residents and satisfying their varied needs or preferences?
Yeah, that's a great question. I would love to spend an hour sometime talking to you about it. But the short answer is, unlike the hotel industry, we have repeat customers. They live there. They're faced with our situation and, in terms of eating every day and also entertaining their friends and family. So I can tell you what we did at the Gatesworth. It's a little outside the box. We have a chef who's been the president of the Chef de Cuisine in St. Louis and is awarded both nationally and internationally. He has a staff of 35 cooks that work in our kitchen. It's run like a European kitchen with a lot of training. We have apprenticeships, and people can get credits towards their culinary degrees. We launch people out across the country. But the key to how you can do that in a way that's economical and works in terms of individual preferences and desires is, instead of investing your money in pre-made food, invest your money in staff and buy less inexpensive fresh food and fresh meats and vegetables and so forth, and cook from scratch. And that's what we do. We do our own baking, we do our own butchering. Every meal is cooked to order, and so we can keep track. If Mrs. Jones has a problem with cilantro and Mrs. So-and-so has problems with salt and so forth.
How many vegetarians do you have?
I don't know, but not that many in this generation. It's surprising.
Yeah.
Yeah, not in that generation.
Right.
Because I'm one, so that would be something that
a lot of their adult children, people who are closer to our age, do have those preferences. And we have a chef who's just as excited about making a hot dog for a kid as he is in doing something that's really cool in a vegan menu.
Yeah. Now, let me tell you, that is a selling point that you just described. I hope you lead with that with your salespeople. But anyway, so we've got to do this again, David, if you're willing to get an update. I'd love to see a documentary on this subject. It fascinates me. And I spend a lot of my time thinking about seniors now, and we have TuckerAllen, a law firm devoted to that. So I'm very interested in the things that you've had to say, and I'd like to circle back again. And I know that it's difficult to get together with video, but I think this worked out pretty well.
Yeah, thank you for the time. I would love next time to come down to the station and meet you guys. And you're welcome to come try the food at the Gatesworth anytime you want.
I will take you up on that.
That's a tempting offer.
Yes.
We'll take you up on that.
You're more than welcome.
Thank you. This has been David Smith, author of It's About Time and co-founder of the Gatesworth Communities in St. Louis. Thank you, David. This has been another episode of Elder Talk. Till next time, take care.
You've been listening to Elder Talk with TuckerAllen, providing intelligent answers for those thinking about their future, with Attorney-CPA Joe Cordell. Sponsored by TuckerAllen, your estate and elder law advisors. For more information, visit TuckerAllen.com. Listen again next Saturday for another edition of Elder Talk with TuckerAllen. The choice of a lawyer is an important decision and should not be based solely on advertisements.